Good evening. Welcome to Discussions with Lakshmi. This evening we'll continue with our study and discussion from the 15th chapter. Good evening. Welcome to Discussions with Lakshmi. This evening we'll continue with our study and discussion from the 15th chapter. Good evening. Welcome to Discussions with Laksmi. This evening we'll continue with our study and discussion from the 15th chapter. Gokula, I'm getting that feedback.
I told you to close YouTube. Did you close YouTube or not? If you don't close this, it's gonna be always feedback. Did you turn off everything? Lakshmi, how many times I have to tell you?
You're on. Okay, here we are. My little glitches with technology. So good evening. Welcome to Discussions with Bhagavad Gita, Chapter 15. Hopefully we'll be concluding the chapter this evening. Before we do so, let's chant the invocation mantras in gratitude and respect to our teacher or teachers, those that have illuminated our path, our progressive path with the torchlight of knowledge. This bhakti tradition, it is so important to experience and demonstrate our gratitude. So before we begin with our discussion, the Bhagavad Gita discussion, we will chant these invocation mantras. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshuru Militam Jena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kudamayam Dadati Swapodantikam Namao Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Sri Mate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirbhishesha Shunyavadi Pastitadishotaline Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityanando Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Okay, chapter 15, entitled The Yoga of the Supreme. So we left off at text 11, I believe, and we are now at text 12, where Krishna is giving us the depth of his involvement in our lives and in the whole creation, maintenance, and destruction of the universe. So text 12 in Gita, in the 15th chapter, reads as follows: "The splendor of the sun, which dissipates the darkness of this whole world, comes from me, and the splendor of the moon and the splendor of fire are also from me." So splendor in this regard means the brightness, the luster. So that brightness of the sun, that brightness of the moon, and the brightness, the luminescence of the fire, that is actually Krishna, comes from Krishna's energy. So text 13 reads, "I enter into each planet, and by my energy, they stay in our orbit. I become the moon, and thereby supply the juice of life to all vegetables." It's interesting to note, from the perspective of Bhagavad Gita and other Vedic texts, that the moon is essential in terms of the juiciness and the sweetness that is contained in fruits and vegetables. That is the particular effect that the luminescence of the moon has on plant life. And also, we know that there's a word called lunatic, and lunatic means that person who is influenced by the energy of the moon. Same thing with the tides, the energy of the moon. So the moon is extremely powerful. The moon is extremely beautiful. And Krishna is saying that splendor of the moon, that is me. I become the moon. And therefore, through the energy which is coming from me, from the moon, or to the moon, and then from the moon to our planet and the effects that it has, that is also coming from Krishna. So Krishna is giving us an understanding of why he is considered supreme. And in this chapter, it's called the Yoga of the Supreme. So that means if we can understand this principle, that God is within everything, God is everything, and how he is within everything and how he is everything, then that principle alone, as will be stated later, will lead us onto the path of liberation. So text 14 reads as follows: "I am the fire of digestion in the bodies of all living entities, and I join with the air of life, outgoing and incoming, to digest the four kinds of foodstuffs." So it's interesting to note, if you look from the Ayurvedic perspective, the Ayurvedic perspective says that there's three basic constitutions Vata, which is the combination of air and ether, Pitta, the combination of water and fire, and Kapha, combination of fire and earth. So these constitutions, the three basic constitutions, and of course there's multiple influences of various constitutions. For instance, when I went to an Ayurvedic doctor, they told me I'm Vata Pitta, which means I have a lot of air and fire combination. So, and then you can tell by body constitution, by skin color, and so many different ways you can tell of your constitution. Now, I'm not an expert in Ayurveda, my wife is, so I won't go into territory that I'm really not qualified to go into. But what I wanted to say is, according to Ayurveda, the power of digestion is coming from fire, from the fire element. So, and also Vaishvanara is considered the personality, which is an incarnation or expansion of the Supreme, which governs this principle of digestion, which is fire. So when there is imbalance within the body takes in, as Krishna says here, 4 kinds of foodstuff. And when you get into analyzing what are the 4 kinds of foodstuffs, it's simply put that which can be licked, that which can be chewed, that which can be drunk, and that which can be sucked. These foodstuffs are categorized in a way where the intake of it. So that's what is being referred to digest the 4 kinds of foodstuffs. Chatur bidha Shri Bhagavad Prasado Swadana Triptin Hari Bhakta Sangam. So these 4 kinds of foodstuff: licked, chewed, drunk, and sucked. Those are the 4 types of foodstuffs. And when they go into our body, through the mouth, where the mouth and the hands are the initiators of digestion. How are the hands? You see, when we touch and we get the texture and the heat and the shape of the food, that is sending signals. So that's why in India, sometimes people, especially from the West, they're a little put off at the fact that you'll see Indians will eat with their hands. Even here in the States, you have finger foods, right? Things that you could pick up with your hands. But in India, as much as possible, you'll see that people are eating with their hands. Number 1, you know how clean your hand is. You wash it with soap and water, it's antiseptic. You get a spoon or a fork. If it's not properly washed, there can be all kinds of germs and diseases on that that spoon or fork. So that's one thing for cleanliness purposes. Secondly, again, it starts triggering digestion by the touch of it, the texture of it, the heat of it, etc. And this begins to send signals. Then when it's put into the mouth, the digestion begins with the saliva. We salivate. You've salivated when you had something that is very delicious, and just the thought of it going into your mouth creates the stimulus of saliva. But that saliva actually has various enzymes in it which start to break down the foods. So it's important in the digestive system that those things are done and done properly. So if the fire in our system is imbalanced, then you don't get proper digestion. And from the Ayurvedic perspective, a lot of diseases come from the inability to properly digest and assimilate your foods. And when you don't digest and assimilate your foods properly, because the fire, the pitta, is imbalanced, there may be too much air, too much fire, etc. And it will cause an imbalance, which will cause the poor digestion or assimilation of the foodstuffs. And that way, when it's not properly digested and assimilated properly, then there's a buildup of amas, or toxins. And from the Ayurvedic perspective, a lot of diseases, a lot of diseased conditions come from the buildup of toxins. Toxicity, even from the Western paradigm, the medical understanding that toxins also have an effect on the organs, and so many different things come from toxicity. When we're too toxic, pitta can be imbalanced by acidity. If you notice, a lot of the foods that are consumed are very acidic by nature, especially processed foods. That's why those people from many different health regimes, natural health regimes, recognize that the acidic diet, water consumption there's not enough water consumption, and conversely, there can be too much water consumption, which could cool or douse the fire of digestion. That's why, from the Ayurvedic perspective, you don't drink a lot of water when you're eating, because if we are to understand digestion is fire, then if you're drinking a lot of water, what does water do to fire? Water puts out the fire, or drastically subdues the potency of fire. So therefore, according to Ayurveda, you don't drink water. Just if you're to drink water, it's just a little bit. Like we have maybe a quarter of a cup or a third of a cup of water, just to kind of keep the foodstuffs in our mouth rinsed and flushed down into the system. But you see people go out, they go out to eat, and they get a huge cup of soda, and half the cup is ice. So you can understand, and if they're eating meat, the combination of that drink, ice cold drink, and the high protein level of what they're eating, it's, first off, the body can't digest that in any case very well. It's just not the makeup of human anatomy. If you look at the human anatomy, the intestines are long like herbivores, and carnivores like tigers and lions, their intestines are like 12 feet, because meat is very difficult. You have to have a very strong acid in the system to digest it, to break it down, which we don't have. And also the very fact that we have over 40 feet of intestines, it stays in the system. It just doesn't get digested properly. In any case, that's why in Ayurveda and other systems, yoga systems in particular, Patanjali, who gives the kind of the guideline for practicing yoga, he describes that in the yamas and niyamas section, he describes that ahimsa is extremely important to practice yoga. What is ahimsa? Nonviolence. What is nonviolence from the yogic perspective? That we are not involved with any unnecessary killing. And especially nowadays, meat eating is a business. It's a slaughterhouse business. And if you've ever seen documentaries on slaughterhouses, you'll understand why and how it is advised, in order to practice yoga, that you do not get involved with eating of meat. It's not healthy. It brings into the system a lot of violence, and a lot of the adrenaline and all the hormonal release that in the animal prior to its being slaughtered. So it's just not recommended. So the digestion alone for the human being is much more better suited to an herbivore diet, a diet of fruits and vegetables and dairy and grains and beans, like that. Beans and grains, they are high in protein, and if you still do not have a strong digestive fire due to the imbalance, then what will happen is you'll get foods that are improperly digested and not assimilated, and that will be the cause of disease. So, Krishna says here, I am the fire of digestion. So it's not only enough to know that he is the source of that digestive energy, but it is also proper to understand that in order to have this work efficiently, that energy to work efficiently, then there are certain guidelines that we should follow in terms of lifestyle and diet. If the digestive fire is imbalanced, then it'll be weak and your digestion will be sluggish. And again, you'll have the toxin problem. So all of these are just elements to understand and to implement in order to practice effectively yoga, the yoga practice. Krishna says that in the, I believe it's the 6th chapter of the Gita, when he talks about balance. Those who are not balanced in eating and in sleeping and in recreation, very difficult to practice yoga. But here we have the yoga of the Supreme. By understanding that who is the Supreme, what is the power, the potencies, the energies of the Supreme, then that gives us the faith and the conviction to practice yoga in a very meaningful way, which will lead us towards ultimately the true nature of the self and in our blissful state in connection with the Supreme through love and through devotion. So text 15, I am seated. This is a very famous verse, and it's a good verse to understand because Krishna is describing the presence, how he is present in the universe and in our own microcosmic universe called the body and the macrocosmic universe, which is the universe, how he is present there. So 15, he says, I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. By all the Vedas, I am to be known. Indeed, I am the compiler of Vedanta, and I am the knower of the Vedas. So the first part describes Krishna, the Supreme, how the Supreme is present. Three different ways according to the Bhagavad Purana or the Srimad Bhagavatam. First, as Brahman. And Brahman is an imperishability, immortality. It is the underpinning of all life. Life and consciousness is coming from Brahman. It's not coming from the material elements. It's not coming from earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, or ego. That is not the source of life, according to the Gita. The source of life is the constitutional position that the spark of Brahman that we are an individual, eternally individual spark of Brahman, that pure conscious energy. And so that is Krishna's presence in imperishability, immortality, and in the very nature, the very constitution and consciousness of the living entity, the soul. So that's one way he's present. The second way he's present, he's describing here. I am seated in everyone's heart. That is called Paramatma. Every living entity has two presences there. First presence is the presence of the soul, the individual spark, which is the spark coming from the great fire, the supreme soul. So that individual spark is seated within the core of our body, in the heart region of our body. Next to that individual spark of consciousness, pure consciousness, is supreme consciousness. Sometimes it's mixed up that I am that supreme consciousness, but not according to Gita. Gita makes a very clear distinction between the soul, the individual spark of pure conscious energy, and the Paramatma. Param means supreme, Atma, soul. There's a distinction. They are individual and distinct from one another. And Krishna says here, I am seated. So that aspect of divinity that is within our heart is an expansion of Krishna, and he is seated within the heart, and from him come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. That is the influence that Paramatma within the core of our heart, seated next to the living entity, has on us. Remembrance, knowledge comes from the Supreme, even forgetfulness. Why forgetfulness? Well, forgetfulness is if you were to remember, number one, all of the pain and suffering and miseries you've endured during the course of this life, what to speak of previous lives, then that would be a pretty heavy burden to carry around. So therefore, we don't remember clearly or distinctly the suffering that we've gone through, the miseries that we've experienced in life. So that forgetfulness assists us in living a relatively, or has the potential to live a relatively peaceful life. But also forgetfulness, if we do not want to know what our constitutional eternal position is, if we want to remain under the illusory energy or illusory force of the material elements that we're interacting with temporarily, then of course Krishna will give us that. Your wish is his desire. So if you desire to forget your relationship with the Supreme, your connection to the Supreme, then that's called Viyoga. Yoga means to connect to the Supreme. Viyoga means to be separated, to be disconnected from the Supreme. So that will happen. And Krishna says that I am that source. I'm seated in your heart, and depending upon your desire, your intention, your inclination, your wish, then I reciprocate accordingly. And then Krishna says, and by all, I am the Vedas. Vedas literally means knowledge. Veda, vid, comes from vidya, knowledge, Veda, knowledge, the source of all knowledge. Ayurveda, the knowledge of life. Dhanur Veda, the knowledge of warfare. All the various Vedic, both the subtexts and the major Vedas, they all are sources of knowledge. So Krishna says, by all the Vedas, I am to be known. Indeed, I am the compiler of Vedanta, and I am the knower of the Vedas. So this is a very important part. Just as the fire of digestion is within the stomach, Krishna is saying, I'm situated in the heart. So just as we have the fire of digestion and an expansion called Vaishvanara, which is controlling that fire of digestion, Krishna is also saying, I am situated in the hearts of all moving and non-moving beings as the principle of intelligence. Indeed, from Krishna, the intelligence principle, comes remembrance of things once experienced, forgetfulness, and perception born from contact of the senses with their objects. This is how he helps, or he assists, living entities that are bound up in the wheel of samsara. Samsara means the wheel of birth, death, and rebirth. So the soul remains within this cycle of birth, death, and rebirth until the soul's realization that me being in this material existence, the blazing fire of material existence, me experiencing the suffering and the miseries of this material existence, that's not me. I am something more than that, something beyond that. Otherwise, we do not relate to non-existence. We relate very well to existence. So is death non-existence? Everything ceases to be? Not according to the Gita. According to the Gita, you, the eternal self, exist beyond death, takes rebirth, goes through another cycle called life. Then again, that life, the temporary situation that we're in when we're embodied, that ceases to exist. Then we keep going on until we learn our lesson. This is a place of rehabilitation. We are to be rehabilitated. And how are we to be rehabilitated? By learning that this material world that we exist in is not our place. It is just a residence, a temporary residence, like a rental. And eventually we have to get out of this. We would maintain our involvement or our shackles in this existence because of what Srila Prabhupada says in one of the purports in this 15th chapter, weakness of heart. Hridaya Durlabha. Hridaya means heart, and Durlabha means the weaknesses of the heart. What are the weaknesses of the heart? Well, there's several. It's a progression to understand. The first weakness of heart is the desire to lord it over material nature. The tendency to see this material world is meant for my exploitation, for my enjoyment. I am the center of the universe and everything is for my pleasure. And that's why we have so much difficulty in the world. Because if everyone is to think like that, then, there's going to be conflict. If I'm the center of the universe, and Madan Mohan is the center of the universe, and Olga is the center of the universe, and Sid is the center of the universe, and Ava is the center of the universe, we're all trying to maintain our centeredness of the universe, that everything should be prioritized for us, for me, not you. So that puts everybody, in a secondary position. So that's not the way we are to understand and to function in this world. So the first weakness of heart, which keeps us shackled in this material world, is called the desire to lord it over material nature and everything within material nature, which means other living entities also. Control, power and control. If you've ever gone to or studied, maybe you are a counselor or you have gone to marital counseling, the key components are power and control. Why do two people argue? Why do two people have irreconcilable differences? It's because of maintaining a strong desire of power and control over the other, rather than seeing it for what it is, as it's a partnership. It's a joint venture. And relationships can never be successful if we don't see it as such and assume the responsibility of that partnership. If we see that, I remember once I was working in the music industry in New York City, and this one lady that our company hired to do makeup and hair for the various artists that we represent, music artists that we represented. And, she was there, and I was just kind of chit-chatting with her. And I said, "Oh, is your husband in this industry also?" She said, "I'm not married." She said, "I got married. It lasted a short time. Too much work. Too much work to be in a relationship." And I thought, when you take vows, isn't that what you're saying? You're ready to commit to the work that it will take to be in a relationship. But, when we have a self-centered perspective, then if it bothers me, if it's not right for me, me becomes the central theme. And of course, there's never enough for me. There's never enough for the me-centered perspective on life. It's all about how I should be catered to. So desire to lord it over material nature. As one increases this desire, strong attachments to and possession of matter we develop. Krishna says, and it's all different according to Krishna, what you contemplate on. Like, some people may contemplate a car or a house or this person or a big position, or, so many innumerable things that we can contemplate on. We become attached to them. And from that attachment, there is a desire to possess. Renunciation does not mean just giving up everything, not from the bhakti perspective. Renunciation means to give up the possessive mindset, the possessive mentality. That's renunciation. So in other words, we're in situations and we recognize, this is not mine. I've been given this. This is why the attitude of gratitude in bhakti is so important. We're grateful. This whole chapter, the yoga of the Supreme, is to see how dependent we actually are as living entities, as creatures of this earth. We're dependent on the energy of the sun, the energy of the moon, the energy of the earth, the energy of water, all of these different things, all of these energies that are out and not within our control, we're dependent on. And that is why Krishna is saying, to give us the understanding that he is that source. And if he is that source, then we're solely and wholly dependent on him and his mercy. This is chapter 15, to give us that knowledge, to give us that awareness, so that we can have within the core of our being gratitude. You are not grateful when you're happy. Gratitude causes the happiness. Because if a person's not grateful, then even you have the money, you have the looks, you have the situation that you want. If gratitude is not there, then you won't be happy with what you have. But even a pauper is proud of his penny. So if a person is in a situation, a very humble situation, but is grateful, then that person can be very, very happy. I've been to villages in West Bengal outside of Mayapur, and by any standard, a hut as a home, not a lot of varieties of food, basically what is grown in the area. All these things are looked at, and the people, and I was amazed to see how the people who lived in that situation were happy. They were satisfied because they were grateful for whatever they had. And when we're not grateful for what we have, then nothing pacifies us. The desire only grows stronger and stronger. So that's a weakness of heart, desire to lord it over, the desire to become attached and to possess matter. From this intense desire, this attachment, from attachment, the desire grows more and more and more. Attachment does not lead to balance. Attachment leads to ever increasing desire. That intensity of desire leads to another weakness of heart, which is called anger or frustration. Why? Because even if you get what you're attached to and you're desirous of, it's still not enough. So that leads to anger. That leads to frustration, another weakness of heart. And from anger comes complete delusion. When we get really angry, we lose intelligence. We can't see things clearly, have a clear perspective. And we can't control our desires. Our desires rule us. Our desires are the main focal point of senses. Desires cause the senses to reach out in the panic that they reach out for, depending on how the intensity of that desire. So peace does not come that way. Peace of mind does not come in that way, especially when the mind is plagued with all these intense desires. So that's delusion arises. We're thinking, okay, if I win the lottery, then I'll be happy. Even though statistically it says that people who win the lottery, they go through divorce as much or more. So, our relationship is we're having problems in our relationship because of financial pressure. Oh, then I just win the lottery. You've heard this, the man just won the lottery, just won $10 million. He runs home. He says, honey, I just won the lottery, $10 million. Pack your bags. Wonderful, dear. Wonderful, dear. Where are we going? Oh, I'm not going anywhere. You just pack your bags and get out. So, this satisfaction is not there. Just increase. Now I got $10 million. Now I can enjoy more. I don't need my wife. I can enjoy it without her. I don't need this home. I can have a bigger home. And the desires grow and the delusion grows. So from delusion, bewilderment of memory, from bewilderment of when memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost. When intelligence is lost, we remain shackled to that whole cycle. Why can't I change? Why can't I, have a better life? It's because we're shackled by these attachments and the whole progression that has resulted from these attachments. So therefore, the potency of bhakti yoga is to get rid of these weaknesses of heart. Get rid of the tendency for attachment. Get rid of the tendency for intense desiring things for my enjoyment, and have a reconfiguration. We change the perspective. It's amazing that when you change the perspective to see things not done to me, but things that are done for me. You can't be grateful for life if you're saying, oh, woe is me all the time. Why am I in this situation? Then, things always are happening. So when we see things, even the negative things that happen in our life as happening to me for my benefit, there's a lesson to be learned. These things are done for my benefit. When that happens, it's a change of perspective. When we see things not as in a self-centered way, we are the center of the universe. Everything is for my enjoyment. And then we have conflicts. Our universes collide. But if we change that perspective and see the Supreme God as the center of the universe, then everything goes from possessing for me and my enjoyment, taking what we have, whatever we have, and seeing it as an offering and being grateful for that opportunity for connection to the Supreme, and reestablishing our loving relationship. Because it is love that gives us the total satisfaction of the heart, not self-centeredness. We misconstrue or misunderstand that when I get everything, then I'm going to be happy, from when I'm giving. Even there's research, psychological research that has been done. There's a great, within the world of psychology, there's a division of psychology which has been exploring happiness. And there have been a number of research projects out there to see what it is psychologically that makes a person happy. And one of the things that makes a person happy, one of the many things that they've discovered, is when one is in the mood of giving. There's more satisfaction that comes to us in our hearts when we're giving rather than receiving. So that requires this element, this change of perspective. So even when we get something and we're giving it to the source, it's a change of perspective. But it's also the cause of relief from the stress and the anxiety of this tendency to accumulate things, possess things, and continue the cycle of ever increasing desires. Krishna says in the second chapter, but a person free from all attachment and aversion, there's two sides to the coin. That which we want, because we think it's going to give us pleasure, and that which we don't want because we think it's going to give us pain or suffering. So that's what attachment and aversion is. Running from things we think will make us not happy, and running away from those things, and running to things that we think are going to make us happy. So attachment and aversion. But Krishna says here, a person free from all attachment and aversion and able to control their senses through regulative principles of freedom can obtain the complete mercy of the Lord. And that is the practice of yoga. When one is practicing yoga, there's regulation. It's called sadhana. Every day you're remembering your connection with the Supreme through sadhana, through japa, through cultivating knowledge, which puts everything in proper perspective, sees the nature of the Lord in my life, and everything I have to be grateful for. We see that. And that gives us a different perspective of life. Everything is not for me. Ishavasyam idam sarvam yat kincha jagat yam jagat tena bunjita ma grita kashasvidanam. That we see everything as Ishwaras, as the Supremes. And for those that don't, they're trying to take what is rightfully the Supremes and enjoy it, and they become a thief in the eyes of the Lord. And a thief is always paranoid that they're going to get caught. So, this is a very important verse. To understand Purushottam Yoga, the 15th chapter, we have to become free from our desires. Otherwise, we can't understand. Let's move on. Text 16, there are two classes of beings, the fallible and the infallible. In the material world, every living entity is fallible. And in the spiritual world, every living entity is infallible. That means, fallible means you make mistakes, you're prone to error, you're not seeing things clearly. So the living entities that are covered by this material energy are called fallible. That means they can be subject to being covered and thus illusioned. Whereas the living entities that are eternally liberated in the spiritual world, they see things properly. They see the connection that they have with the Supreme and how everything in relationship to the Supreme is truly satisfying. 17. Besides these two, there is the greatest living personality, the Supreme Soul. So the fallible, the living entities in this world, Adibhotik, Nityabada, and then the infallible living entities. Nityabada means eternally caught up in this cycle, and Nityasiddha, eternally free from this cycle and in the spiritual world. So besides these two living entities that are either in this material world or free of the shackles of this material world and living in a free, joyful, eternally blissful life, there is the greatest living personality, the Supreme Soul, the imperishable Lord himself, who has entered the three worlds and is maintaining them. So this distinguishes the Supreme from the ordinary living entity. The Supreme Purusha mentioned in this verse from the other two Purushas. In other words, Purusha, there's Prakriti and there's Purusha. Prakriti means the material energy, but the interior material energy has no life, is not aware. There's no awareness in material energy. The awareness factor, the consciousness factor, comes from the energy which is Purusha. And within Purusha, the spiritual energy, there's the spiritual energy in the form of soul that gets caught up in the material energy and gets illusioned and influenced by it. There is the Purusha, the living entity that is free from the shackles and the illusion of this material energy and is living in constant association with the Supreme. And then there's the Supreme. So those three are there, which comprise Purusha, or the spiritual energy. And the material energy has no awareness of itself and has 8 different elements which comprise the material energy: earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and ego. 18. Because I am transcendental, beyond both the fallible and the infallible, and because I am the greatest, I am celebrated both in the world and in the Vedas as that Supreme Person. So Krishna, in many, many different places in the Gita, which is accepted, from the Vedic paradigm as the canonical text, the text that really lays out an understanding of the philosophy of yoga, the process that reunites us in our constitutional position with the Supreme. It's here Krishna saying, I am celebrated in this world and in the Vedas as the Supreme Person. Now, celebrated means names are chanted. So when we see the presence of God in different cultures with different names, that is not referring to a different personality. It's referring to the same person. Allah, Jehovah, Yahweh, Buddha, Krishna, Rama, Vishnu, all of these various names of that same singular Supreme, that all living entities have a relationship with, one kind of relationship or another. And it's a relationship of love. 19. Whoever knows me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead without doubting is the knower of everything. He therefore engages himself in full devotional service to me, O son of Bharata. Does that mean they know every single, how many windows are in the Empire State Building? No. It means that you know that everything is emanating from the Supreme, including me. And that complete knowledge of that, Om Purnam Ada Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Udachate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. That complete whole is the source of all other parts. And that part, that living entity, that finite, that small, that very small, tiny living entity is also complete in and of itself. So these two, the complete whole, the supreme, and the finite, there's infinite personality and finite personality. The infinite personality, that is the possession of God, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The finite eternality and individuality, that is the property, that is what the living entities, the souls, are. And if we know this point, then we know everything we need to know in this world. Number 20, this is the most confidential part of the Vedic scriptures. O sinless one. The word here, anaga, O sinless. Now, sinless, and the word sin, it has a Judeo-Christian or Abrahamic religion connotation, but also sin literally means, from the Roman word, it literally means to make error, to have error of judgment. So how do you become sinless? Like a person say, I'll never become sinless. I've got so many desires. And no, it means error in judgment. You may make a mistake, but if you learn from that mistake, it becomes a lesson. Always keeping in the forefront of your perspective, your relationship with the Supreme, and the Supreme's being in the center of your universe. If you can always keep that mindset, even we make some mistakes, or as here, sinless means having the clarity of perspective to know we are not the center of the universe, that the Supreme Lord is, and as a result, we are in service. We are giving out of gratitude, out of appreciation to that Supreme through sacrifice. This is the most confidential part of the Vedic scriptures, O sinless one. And this is a footnote, I'm revealing this, Krishna is saying to Arjuna, because you're in that position of being sinless. And it is disclosed now by me. Whoever understands this will become wise, and his endeavors will know perfection. So wisdom, you'll become wise, and your endeavors will meet with perfection. So what does wise mean? You see things in proper perspective, and you have the judgment to always realize that you are in loving service to the Supreme. You're always able to maintain that judgment, no matter what difficulties you may have, whatever mistakes you may make. You never make the error of judgment into thinking that there is no God, there is no Supreme, I have no relationship. As long as that's fixed, that understanding is fixed, then we can progress towards a sinless life. and thus, by the mercy of the Supreme, we can have true knowledge. It's 8 o'clock. I will stop here. Thank you so much for your kind attention. Does anyone have any question, any comment, any observation you'd like to make? I'm happy to entertain any kind of questions or comments or realizations that you might want to share with us. Anyone? Sid, how you doing? All right? Any questions? No? Okay, what do we have here? I see. Thank you. You're welcome. You are welcome. Anyone have any other questions or? Okay, so thank you so much for participating in our discussion of Bhagavad Gita. So next week, next Wednesday, 7 o'clock, we'll resume our discussion by beginning with chapter 16. Chapter 16 is titled, yeah, someone there?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm very sick.
You're what?
I'm very sick.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry to hear that.
But I listened to the whole thing.
Bless you. I hope you get well.
Yes, Harry Ball.
Hari Bol. Okay, thanks so much, everyone. Till next time, you have a happy, healthy, and holy week. Hare Krishna.
Thank you,
Hare
Lakshmi.
Krishna.
Thank you,
Hare
Olga.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you.